Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's Energy to Lead, this year's RE100 Members Forum and Awards. I'd like to begin with some brief opening remarks, and then I'll introduce our first three guest speakers for today from Pernod Ricard, Eskom, and Climate Group. Our Executive Director of Systems Change, Mike Pearce, will then join us on stage to announce this year's RE100 Leadership Award winners, and then I'll end the session with some brief closing remarks. So some of you in the audience are RE100 members, some of you are our local partners or other key stakeholders, but for those that aren't familiar with RE100, I'll begin with a very brief introduction. So RE100 is the global renewable energy initiative for corporates, bringing together over 440 of the world's largest, most influential businesses with a commitment to source 100% renewable electricity. And our mission, as showing on screen, is to accelerate change towards zero carbon grids globally by 2040. But how do we do this? Well, our membership base spans the globe, but also all industries, from manufacturing to food, from fashion to technology. And that's really important for two reasons. So firstly, we're able to harness that combined demand signal to go directly to policymakers and work with them to reduce the barriers to sourcing renewables for our corporates. And secondly, we work really closely with our members to understand the specific nuances and challenges within each of our markets, so the messaging that we take to policymakers can be really clear and specific. Shortly, I'll come on to some examples of that policy work in practice, but first, I'd just like to start at the very beginning, so why a company might choose to make an RE100 commitment. So RE100 involves making a commitment to use 100% renewable electricity across your operations by 2040 or sooner. And we have over 440 big businesses that have already decided to make this commitment. And here are just a few reasons why. So firstly, leadership. RE100 is a leadership initiative. By aligning your corporate procurement strategy with RE100, you're aligning with the de facto global standard for corporate RE sourcing. Secondly, accountability. So by reporting to RE100 year on year on your progress against that target, you're remaining accountable whilst also being transparent about the markets in which you're struggling to procure. Thirdly, that transparency is really important for our policy advocacy work and for driving real-world impact. So we work with you to help you to access cheaper renewables in the long term whilst also remaining competitive in the short run. Fourth, we have further member benefits such as peer learning, knowledge sharing, capacity building, events, networking opportunities, and profiling. Finally, by making an RE100 commitment, you're aligning yourselves with a 1.5-degree pathway, SBTi emissions reductions, and GHG Scope 2 accounting protocol, and better preparing yourself for incoming regulations and mandatory reporting requirements. In my final two slides, I've taken just a few key statistics from our latest impact report to give a sense of the scale of the RE100 membership base and its impact. This first slide bears weight to the size of the membership base, so 436 at the time of publishing and more today, over 170 markets worldwide. This represents an aggregated demand of 570 terawatt hours a year, which is greater than the annual electricity consumption of South Korea. And that represents a 12% increase over the course of last year. That was made up of a combination of both the growth of operations in our existing membership base, but also new members making an RE100 commitment. Last year, we were able to do more with that combined demand signal than ever before. So firstly, we had local campaigns activated in 10 markets across the globe, including South Korea, South Africa, and Indonesia, to name just a few examples. This led to over 20 direct engagements with policymakers. And these are policymakers that know who RE100 is, they respect our role as representatives of the corporate voice, and they often use our reports or cite our name directly in key decision-making. Last year alone, we were able to improve 4 renewable energy policies, and I'll end with just 2 quick examples. So firstly, Malaysia, which recognized the importance of aligning with RE100 standard and rigorous processes. We were recognised multiple times in their national energy policy, and they also recalibrated their renewable energy certificate scheme to better align with RE100 requirements. There was also the launch of a corporate renewable energy supply scheme, which basically allows corporates to buy clean energy directly from developers and aligns with RE100's global policy principles. Meanwhile, in line with our local policy recommendations in South Korea, and after ongoing engagement with government there, the Korean Energy Agency has enhanced its green premium scheme following RE100 calls for greater transparency, accessibility, and additionality. I'll stop there. I could go on, but if you'd like to find out more examples of RE100 policy advocacy work, I'd recommend you go to our website and you can download the impact report there. So I've mentioned leadership and RE100's leadership campaign, but it can be hard to keep up with what this means in such a rapidly changing economic and geopolitical space. So now I'd like to first welcome up our 3 guest speakers who span the private, public, and third sector to discuss why it's so important to stay ahead of the curve on renewables and how they're doing so. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Noemi Bauer, the CSO of Pernod Ricard, Nontokozo Hadebi, the Group Executive of Strategy and Sustainability at Eskom Holdings, and Ollie Wilson, Head of RE100 and Energy Operations, on stage for our first panel. Great, and thank you, the 3 of you, for joining us. Set the scene a little bit, but just to build on that foundation, Ollie, I think if we start with yourself. So from RE100's perspective, what is renewable energy leadership and what does that look like for a corporate versus at a country level?
Yeah, I guess it's a term that's bandied around quite a lot, renewable energy leadership. So let's maybe say what we think that means for RE100. You mentioned government, so let's start there. Really, I think for governments, it's around giving the right signals. Renewable energy is an investment. It's a long-term investment, a financial transaction that needs certainty, and a policy framework that implies ambition, so an ambitious renewable target for the country, I think is something that's really important to give that signal to companies, to investors, that their investment is going to be secure. Also, getting the right sort of market design, policy design in place as well for governments. So one thing that we have with RE100 is our 6 global policy priorities, and it's almost like a checklist of what we'd expect to see governments doing around the world to ensure that it's a good renewable energy market in that country. To touch on those slightly, 4 of those are procurement methods for corporates, so like power purchase agreements, certificates, green tariffs, for example. And then the other 2 are more around market conditions, around affordability and ambition. On the corporate side, what does that mean? I guess there's 2 different ways we look at it. There's the actions the corporates are directly taking themselves. And can you be more impactful with what you're doing yourself? So more impactful procurement and more additionality. But also, what are you doing as a company that's affecting the wider energy system? So maybe that's policy work and trying to change the broader system. And I guess that plays into our theory of change, right? Ultimately, we're trying to get companies to set ambitious targets and use that as a demand signal to encourage governments to put in place better policies. So the sort of connection of both sorts of leadership.
Great, yeah, definitely. I think we'll come on to that collaboration piece shortly, kind of across the panel as well. And could you give us an example there, Ollie, then of the work that RE100 has done to try and boost leadership across those 2 spheres, so like at a corporate level and then also like at a country level as well?
Okay, yes, on a corporate level, we've done a piece that we've called Increasing Ambition. Does what it says on the tin. So with our members, both new and existing members, we've tried to encourage them to bring forward their overall targets, so to be 100% renewable by whatever year, to bring that forward. And that's something we've been doing for a few years now, and we've got 50 companies to move forward their targets, and that's actually 46 terawatt hours of fossil fuel electricity being averted by these companies moving forward their targets. And you can see the real direct emissions impact of that, but it sends a signal to governments that corporate ambition is increasing and they need to move faster to meet that. On the government side, maybe an example of where we've had some success and got better leadership. So the Glasgow COP, go back a couple of years ago now, COP26, that was the last global stocktake where countries put forward their NDCs, their nationally determined contributions. And Brazil this COP is going to be the next one of those, right? So it's the ratchet mechanism of the COP process. Around that, many countries put forward their energy plans to coincide with their COP commitments. And in Japan, last time round, Japan put forward their energy plan. And initially, the draft plan had a renewable energy target for 2030 of 22 to 24%. And many of our members, we've got many headquartered in Japan, were particularly concerned that that was actually going to limit their own ambition. So we mobilized our membership, we put an ad in a Japanese paper, I had a press conference, had many meetings with government to encourage greater ambition. And in the final version, the target was actually raised to 36 to 38%. So an example of how those two things can play in again.
Great, yeah, thanks, Ollie. And maybe if we stick with that country level for now. So obviously, I think it's been talked about across the conference. Countries are striving for energy security, and renewables are increasingly being recognised as a key driver to achieve that. So Nontokozo joining us from Eskom, the power utility in South Africa. I guess, Nontokozo, from your perspective and Eskom's perspective, what are the key benefits to be had from a renewable energy transition in South Africa?
Okay, thank you, Natasha. Let me greet first, good afternoon, and acknowledge and grateful that we are part of the discussions today. Thank you to RE100 and NBI, our partners back home. Really, it is widely reported that South Africa, Africa in general, has very good renewables potential because of our solar intensity or radiation. Also, in terms of just hydro, wind potential, we've got loads of that. So there's that benefit in terms of being naturally endowed with these resources. And in the context of South Africa, there are a number of benefits in harnessing this. We're starting with energy transition. I can come back to it later on. Currently, our energy source, me, myself, representing Eskom, it's over 83%, hovering about 83% or so, from fossil fuels, coal. We are endowed with coal as well. And therefore, the move or the energy transition, particularly driven by renewables, has that potential for us to accelerate our transition from the potential that renewables have in our country. And it is a strategy that at a country level we are really driving hard. The second part is energy security. I know there was a session earlier on that was talking about security, affordability, the trilemma, which we are battling with. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend because it was going to overlap with this session. From our perspective, from a coal perspective, we have reached capacity levels for most of our coal stations. We have to shut them down at some point. And there is a potential then to bring in, as fast as we can, the renewables to balance our energy mix, which is one thing that we are looking at. And you will also know that we come from a very difficult period where from a generational capacity, we had serious challenges with the supply not meeting the demand. So we had to do load shedding. even at a little scale, the renewables came in and mitigated the significance of load shedding, even though they are still at 10% or 10% of the generational capacity. So we do see that also just coming in and helping with the energy security to a certain extent. One of the important areas as well is really driving the economy. South Africa has not been, since even before COVID, we've been struggling with economic growth. The numbers are quite suboptimal, and there is a potential to really use the energy transition to also drive the economic growth. How so? Not necessarily just from the energy provision, the electricity supply, but also just building the supply chains, localizing and manufacturing some of the equipments and components in the country, thereby just generating the required economic returns and the job creation. So it's how we are seeing it as really key benefits where we can really leverage. And it is encouraging to also see government also at a state level recognizing the benefit and also pulling together the critical tools and policies to enable the transition. Let me stop there for now. Thank you.
No, great, and that leads really nicely into my second question. I think you've touched on it a little bit there of so how you're aligning strategy and sustainability. Obviously that's like a dual part of your role, and you talked briefly around how some of these areas would be strategic for Eskom, sort of even without decarbonisation in mind. But yeah, how kind of practically are you aligning those two pieces?
Yes. From Eskom at this point in time is, as I indicated, 80%. It's using our coal fleet. But what we are looking at, so the key part of our strategy and sustainability is that obviously we have to make sure that the company is operationally sustainable because we're coming from a very challenging point. Even the coal fleet that we have to optimize it as best as we can, just for energy security and securing the base load for the country in the short to medium term. But in the long term, there are reforms, as we have seen them in Europe and different countries in the energy reform, where you're opening the market. Currently, Eskom is more of a monopoly, now opening the market to a number of players. So that is the key strategy now. We are currently a vertically integrated company. We are unbundling to 3 different parts so that we can allow other parties to be part of the energy transition. That's the first thing. The second thing, there's really a potential. We've seen a lot of energy projects, particularly in South Africa, small scale. But as the utility, I think we have a potential to start leading the utility scale renewables. And that is core to our strategy. Firstly, we do have land, we do have the resources, we do have grid capacity. So we're using our land to just push a renewables project, mostly PV, wind and battery storage at a small scale, but that gives us a good 2 gigawatts in 2 years and 5 in 5 years or so. But our intention is really about 20 gigawatt by 2040 or so, and that we can only do if we start pushing the utility scale renewables. That's at a core of our strategy, but it's definitely something that we are not doing alone, working with the private sector and all other parties. And that in itself then help us decarbonize and reach an optimal energy mix as the country as well. Thanks.
Great, and I think, yeah, to your last point, you touched on kind of collaboration, but also looking to learnings from other countries and policies. So how important is that collaboration going to be to, I guess, the implementation of that strategy?
I cannot overemphasize the role of collaboration across the sectors, the state, the associations like yourself, the private sector, the funders, and that we've seen it with the challenges that we've had. All parties came together to help us manage the challenges. And as we move into the transition, definitely that's the key enabler of our strategy, to a point where we see, as we are unbundling, as we are relooking at our business models from the generational capacity perspective, transmission and distribution, we're also seeing an opportunity of a very dedicated, focused company, if I can put it like that, which we're going to call Energy Green, but obviously we have to go through necessary government processes to establish that company, which for us, it brings in the partnerships and collaboration with a number of stakeholders. Energy transition is happening at a very fast pace. It's capital intensive. It's new skills and technologies that you have to keep up with. So even utility to utility collaboration, we collaborate a lot with other state utilities, particularly on emerging technologies, so that we can just take and deploy in our, we don't have to do the same. So we see it, NGOs as well, because NGOs help us, here in the room, most of us, we think global, they help us to act local. So we even have initiatives with the NGOs, particularly even on small scale things like clean cooking, which contributes, the microgrids, which serves particular communities. We work a lot with NGOs to come up with those local-based solutions. Thank you.
Great, and yeah, I think while we're on South Africa, it'd be good to touch, Ollie, briefly on the launch of RE100's local policy recommendations in South Africa in July, I think it was, of this year. So could you tell us kind of how those recommendations came about, some of that collaboration that was touched on there, and really what those recommendations are designed to achieve, so that kind of RE100 theory of change in practice?
Yeah, it's, I'd say, been one of the more exciting things we've been up to in the last year. We have about 110 companies who have operations in South Africa, and really to get some policy recommendations together, we speak to our members. A model we use a lot, you've probably heard us refer to as policy working groups. So we had a smaller number of committed members in a policy working group, and we used the global policy priorities, what I mentioned in an earlier answer, as a sort of guiding framework of, okay, that's the checklist that we'd like to see in South Africa. We then translated that into, I guess, the local context, and had a set in the end of South African policy recommendations, and launched those in July in Johannesburg. Just to give you a little flavour of what they're pointing at, we're looking at market reforms that are already in place, sort of those being implemented, or sorry, already started, those to be implemented and be speeded up. We're looking at a really clear renewable energy target that's sort of coordinated across various bits of policy, and also to enable more direct access for corporates to buy renewables. So, you think of power wheeling and power purchase agreements. I think there could be some fantastic benefits for South Africa as a whole from doing that. There's the lowering electricity prices, there's the jobs that this will create and the economic benefit for the country from that as well. And also on the earlier answer around sort of energy security and providing secure, stable energy as well. So I think there's some benefits to be had there. What was really, really pleasing from the event, and I may even say it's probably, when we've launched policy recommendations, I'd say it's probably the first country I've really seen this, the alignment of the message coming out of the government, coming out of the presidential office, Eskom, state utility, and companies. Everyone got what was needed to be done, and it was more a case of, okay, let's get on and do it. And the policy recommendations we've put forward, I think, give that sort of implementation steps to do it. But it was, really positive to see that sort of coordination, as we were talking about earlier. So.
Great, thank you. And I think shifting there, I think, to the corporate perspective. So we've got Naomi from Pernod Ricard, and your organisation joined RE100 in 2019 and has since progressed rapidly towards your 2025 target. So that exact corporate signal and action that's so critical to that policy work that we've discussed. I think, yeah, just to start at the beginning, could you tell us a little bit about why you set such an ambitious kind of 6-year turnaround commitment and how you've progressed against that?
Thank you. So thank you for having us. First of all, I should say that Pernod Ricard is a global wine and spirit company, because not everyone knows what Pernod Ricard is. And so in 2019, we launched our global sustainability strategy, addressing both environmental and social aspects from all of our value chain. And a big aspect of this strategy is really to decarbonize. And we wanted to make sure that we would source all of the electricity that we use for our site, but also for offices in more than 70 countries to be renewable. And so we took that target in 2019 to be within 6 years, 100% renewable electricity. And when we set the target, we were about 70% of renewable, but we didn't have a global strategy. It was really about opportunities, market per market. So we decided to join RE100 to really have a global and holistic strategy to make sure that in the short term and the long term, we'll know what to source, where, and how. And so we used all of the available tools. So we used on-site generated energy, we use PPAs, certificates as well, and green contract with our suppliers. And within 6 years, we managed to reach that target. So I think it's just showing that a corporate can move the needle if it sets itself some ambitious targets.
Great, and yeah, we've had a few conversations with Pernod Ricard over the course of this summer, and I think what's been really one of the many positive things in those, often when a company has a final few markets where it's like impossible basically to procure, they often don't know what to do with that. And I think what we've kind of understood from your organization is that you're really still using continued action and demand signaling in those final few kind of percentiles where it's currently impossible, to not stop there and keep going and using that kind of investment demand signal. So could you touch a little bit on, where you are finding the most challenges and how you've addressed those?
Yeah, so indeed, when you operate in more than 70 countries, there will be markets where it's impossible. But we didn't take no for an answer. So I have 2 examples. There's one production of rum that we have in the Caribbean, and another brandy operation in Armenia. So in the Caribbean, in that country that I'm not going to mention here, it's a country where there's a lot of load shedding, a lot of power outages. And solar was just not common at all. So we decided to be more independent with our energy and installing solar panel as well for our target, even if there people thought it was impossible. And in 2022, we started to install solar panels, and today we produce more electricity that we need for own operation, so we even re-inject into the national grid. So we were the first company to do that, and the government gave us certificates because now we're shifting the energy market in that country, in the Caribbean. And in Armenia, it was the same. The energy providers were telling us that renewable were not possible, but we continued the work because we had that target, and we really wanted to shift that market as well. And after a lot of stakeholder engagements, we managed to find an energy supplier that had hydro and solar. And initially, they didn't want to supply the entire quantity for us, but step by step, we managed to have a long-term contract with them, and now we source renewable there as well. So yeah, the collective action, and I think that's what Hélène said yesterday in the opening ceremony. With the collective action, you can really shift the energy market, and I think we showed that corporate with different suppliers and sometimes governments, such as in the Caribbean, we can shift the market together.
Yeah, and that's why I really loved that example, because often companies will come to RE100 and there are many markets, over 10, that we are doing kind of a more organized policy work stream in, but there are so many smaller markets that we are not yet operating in, but we would really encourage companies to go out proactively, either themselves or linking up with a few other members in that space, and we can help with that peer connection as well. But yeah, that's why I love that example. I think to end there with you, Naomi, so renewables, obviously, this is a conference beyond just renewables. Renewables are often the first step in an organization's broader kind of sustainability strategy. So how does RE100 fit within your kind of wider CSR roadmap?
So as part of our CSR roadmap, we have a lot on carbon reduction and carbon adaptation. So indeed, renewable was really the first step for Scope 2. We have ambitious science-based targets that are aligned with the trajectory of 1.5 degree. We announced them in 2024 with the new net zero standard of SBTi. And if we take just Scope 1 and 2, we have a target to reduce by minus 54% our Scope 1 and 2 by 2030 and minus 90% by 2050. And this year, in 2025, we already have reduced by 42% in absolute value our Scope 1 and 2. And as part of this effort of reduction, 30% of what we have reduced is thanks to renewable. So it's really an important decarbonization lever, but it's not the only one. And we know that we have a lot to do on Scope 3. So we have to work with all of our suppliers. We have to improve the energy efficiency. We have to switch sources of energy, but also materials for the packaging, also the practices in agriculture. So it's really a holistic strategy to mitigate our impact with the carbon emission that we emit, but also adapt to the new world. And we have a lot on agriculture because wine and spirit are made from natural ingredients. So it's really a holistic strategy from grain to glass. And this year in 2025 was really a milestone because we have half of our commitments that have expired in 2025, the rest are for 2030. And the ones that have expired, such as the renewable electricity, they're becoming business as usual. So basically we're integrating them into our operating processes and rules. So now any electricity contract within any market within Pernod Ricard will have to go renewable, and we have our internal audit teams that will check. So it's no longer a sustainability strategy, it is a business operating model. So that's really how we're shifting from doing the right thing for the business for the long term.
Yeah, great. And I think that echoes what Nontokozo said as well. It's got to be kind of business first, and the strategy has to align, the business strategy, the sustainability strategy. So that's great. Thank you to all three of our guests, so Ollie, Nontokozo, and Naomi, for joining us. Please join me in a round of applause. And I'd now, this is perfect. I'd now like to welcome our Executive Director of Systems Change, Mike Pearce, on stage to announce this year's RE100 Leadership Award winners.
Hello everyone. I have the happy job at the end of this day of the Hub at Climate Week to be able to have a warm welcome to the RE100 Leadership Awards, which is a great pleasure to introduce the winners today. These awards are our way of celebrating RE100 members who are at the forefront of the transition to renewable electricity. All our members have made, and indeed are progressing, against an ambitious commitment to 100% renewables. But the members who've succeeded in these awards are going above and beyond in that journey, showcasing their leadership, dedication and impact. And we've seen in today's session just how important the corporate demand signal can be to driving real change in energy markets. I'd really like to thank every member who's entered the RE100 Awards this year. All entries were impressive and noteworthy. And I'd also like to thank our excellent judges who were really delighted by, the award categories they saw this year, who put a lot of time and expertise into these awards and to make it possible. Our first category, I'm just checking for the clicker to be able to move. Will someone move the slides, or will someone have a clicker to do so? We have a clicker. Wonderful. Our first category this afternoon is the RE100 Best Newcomer. This award recognises a member who has joined since 2024 and already taken a notable step towards their goals. 100% commitment can be daunting, and so we celebrate those corporates that hit the ground running. We have two shortlisted members for this award, and they are Hang Lung Properties and Arrow Electronics. And the winner is Hang Lung Properties. So, Hang Lung were chosen for their impressive work in setting up networks and overcoming challenges sourcing renewable electricity in China. Unfortunately, Hang Lung cannot join us today. We'll be posting them their trophy, and so I'm going to say another final quick round of applause for Hang Lung, which will have sound there to remember to do for doing this. Wonderful award winners for Best Newcomer. Our second category is the RE100 Changemaker. Here we celebrate members who have set ambitious renewable electricity targets and made significant progress against their goal. This year's shortlist is Estée Lauder, Asahi Kassafe Homes, and SKF. And the winner is, I'm delighted to say, Asahi Kassafe Homes. Asahi Kassafe Homes have successfully achieved 100% renewables against a very ambitious target year. They were chosen also for their expanded solar power installation on new and existing homes and for their utilisation of this electricity across their supply chain. So please welcome on stage to receive the award. Okay. The third category today is the RE100 Enterprising Leader. This category recognises members from smaller industries or from home markets who are making a difference and inspiring others, often on a smaller scale, empowering anyone to contribute to our collective mission. Again, we have 3 companies on our shortlist: HNI Corporation, Envision, and Murata Manufacturing. And I'm delighted to say that the winner for this award for Enterprising Leader is Murata Manufacturing. Murata was selected for their leadership in Japan, bringing forward their target date by 15 years. They source creatively using solar power, battery storage, and efficiency measures. And moreover, with Japan regularly cited as one of the more challenging markets for members, they champion policy efforts in the country. And so I'm delighted to ask Murata to join me on stage to collect their award. Congratulations, well done. That's wonderful. Here you are. Okay, our penultimate category is the RE100 Key Collaborator. This award celebrates our members who are working proactively with peers and suppliers to support a transition to renewable electricity at scale. Transparency and collaboration are cornerstones of RE100, and through this award, we recognise members championing this behaviour. Our shortlist for this is Lloyds Banking Group, Nike, and ASM. And the winner of the Key Collaborator Award this year is Nike. Nike were chosen for their ambitious supplier climate action programme, and indeed we'll be hearing more from them shortly on this. And so please join me in welcoming Scott Vitters, the Senior Director of Climate and Environment at Nike, onto the stage. Grab a seat, please. Okay, and our final category for this year's awards is the RE100 Market Trailblazer. Here we celebrate the members who are committed to driving mass market change using their size and influence to achieve the RE100 mission of zero carbon grids globally by 2040. Our shortlist for this award was Mars, Envision, and Murata. Delighted the final winner for today is Mars. Congratulations. Very Very good. Well done. Mars were chosen for their renewables acceleration strategy designed to extend their renewable procurement and impact into their value chain. So congratulations on that. Okay, so look, that concludes today's awards ceremony. 5 very worthy and fantastic winners. As befits this, it's got a nice opportunity here now for Tash to talk to 2 of those winners, to go through some of the details of their work and hear more about that. So thanks again to all of the winners and the process and the judges as before. Tash, over to you.
You're far right, yeah, and then I'm in the middle.
Perfect. Thank you both. So yeah, this is the first year that we've managed to actually get 2 of our award winners on stage with their awards to discuss those entries in a little bit more detail. They're available on the website, but it's really good to kind of get into the detail with you both a little bit here as well. So Kevin, I'll start with you from Mars. So RE100 Market Trailblazer, it celebrates companies who are committed to accelerating market change. And a key lever to do that is through the corporate demand signal, as we've discussed. But interestingly, in our latest annual disclosure report, it showed that a quarter of RE100 companies, so over 100 companies, have already reached between 90 and 100% of their Scope 1 and 2 target. So many of their direct electricity needs are already being met. But obviously, we have this target to triple global renewables by 2030. So how can companies balance that and continue to drive impact and bring new renewables on the grid beyond their own operations?
Yeah, absolutely. Solve for the renewable electricity in their supply chain. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Yeah, so everyone always talks about, Scope 3 dwarfs Scope 1 and 2 emissions in general. It's a very sort of common refrain. It turns out the same thing is true of electricity load in your value chain. And the insight that we had after many years of trying various approaches to engage our suppliers in renewable electricity procurement, with some success, not as much as we'd liked, and it was quite hard. It took a lot of work, took a lot of time, took a lot of effort. We had an insight that we could do what we now call renewables acceleration, which is we already have very detailed Scope 3 footprint calculations for our business, all the way upstream, all the way downstream. Within those calculations, because we and Nike and many of our peers have very sophisticated calculations, you can open those up and find the megawatt hours in there. And once we have a megawatt hour, we know how to solve for megawatt hours. You go procure EACs in credible ways, such as following RE100 guidelines, and you retire those EACs against those megawatt hours. The insight behind renewable acceleration is 2-part. One, inside of our Scope 3 footprint, we're already megawatt hours. We just had to go find them. And then the second one was that it doesn't actually matter whether the supplier does the procurement, retires the EAC, or we do the procurement and retire the EAC. So that's what we're doing in renewables acceleration. For a sense of scale, in our direct operations, so let's say Scope 2 electricity, the RE100 commitment that Mars has made, we're about 2 terawatt hours globally. When we do this math on our value chain for Scope 3, it's an incremental 6 to 7 terawatt hours. And so that's what we're pursuing with the renewable acceleration strategy is sourcing renewables for that 6 to 7 terawatt hours. We issued a press release last week about the first contracts that we've signed under RAC, or renewable acceleration, which were 1.8 terawatt hours in the US. So almost a third of everything we're eventually going to do with renewables acceleration. We've already signed the contracts, and there'll be more coming in the very near future. And that's a great example of, we were quite far down the path on our own 2 terawatt hours, and you made the point of companies are sort of saturating their Scope 2 demand. We were pretty far down that path. Renewable acceleration has now just brought us back into the market, and essentially immediately we've doubled the amount of renewables that we would otherwise buy if we were just chasing Scope 2. And so in a sense, Mars was here on stage, not this stage, it was a different venue, in 2014 with Swiss Re and IKEA launching RE100. So that was 11 years ago, and basically we're here back today to effectively, RAC makes us RE400. because we're doing another 300% worth in our value chain. And we think it's a strategy that any other company with enough data and procurement expertise could copy.
Great, and yeah, it's that renewable acceleration strategy that's won you this year's award. You mentioned a contract that you've already signed there, so I guess using that as an example, how important was that kind of aggregated value chain demand in being able to achieve such a large-scale contract?
Oh, we would have had no reason to do another contract. We were almost 100% in the US. We were a little bit short because the business had grown. We'd made an acquisition, but there was no reason for us to do another contract in the US. We already had 2 PPAs. We needed a few more tens of gigawatt hours, but we wouldn't have gone to market at all. So, almost the entirety of that 1.8 terawatt hours, 1,800 gigawatt hours. I get hyperscalers talking terawatt hours. Us normal people don't usually, but now we are. Yeah, almost all of that is to cover Scope 3, and there will be more in the US, and we're doing it in other countries as well.
Yeah, and I can imagine from what I hear that a lot of suppliers appreciate you kind of applying your own procurement expertise to support them in achieving that kind of renewable aggregation. So a lot of RE100 companies we speak to, their suppliers don't necessarily have as large kind of in-house procurement teams, as much experience with those kind of contracting and other mechanisms. Scott, Nike, very similarly, looking beyond your Scope 1 and 2 as well, also a long-standing member of RE100 and very involved in our policy advocacy work. So maybe just starting there at the very beginning with where you're at with your current journey.
Sure. First of all, let me say on behalf of the global Nike family how much we appreciate and thank you for the award, and also appreciate everybody sticking around. I know it's a long day and it's a long week at Climate Week, so a big thank you for everybody hanging in here for today. The question's great to come up right now because it was 10 years ago that Nike joined and made a commitment to RE100. We joined RE100 and we also set that target around being able to get to 100% market-matched renewable electricity by 2025. Last year we had 96% verified renewable electricity usage, and I'm pleased to say by May we've contracted 100%, and so we're getting that verified as well. Thank you. There's the number, but I'd also say it's about how we're doing it that is probably making us more proud about the approach. And we've got about approximately 70% that's grid-connected PPAs or virtual PPAs. About 60% of that is contributing additionality. And then you've got 10% that's on-site wind and solar. We're very pleased to have wind turbines at both our European and China logistics centers. And I also should note that Nike has the world's largest solar swoosh in Australia.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Amazing. And yeah, after all that achievement, it's then on to Scope 3.
On to Scope 3.
So obviously, yeah, you've won Key Collaborator Award. We've talked about collaboration a lot today. And I think that award is really for members who are working together with their peers, with their suppliers. How has collaboration been central to your Scope 3 strategy?
Yeah, I mean, at Nike, we talk about winning as a team. And anybody that's been in this space at all knows that the only way we're going to drive the decarbonization strategies that we all expect is through collaboration and teamwork. And Kevin already made reference to the fact that the majority of our emissions impact is obviously within our Scope 3. We've made great strides, and it's a result solely of collaboration. And if you look over the last 5 years, we've had about a 30% absolute emissions reduction across our entire Scope 3. A large part of that has come out of manufacturing and our partnership with suppliers. And maybe I'll just highlight kind of 4 key collaboration initiatives. There are many more, but I think there are 4 maybe of highlighting some of the work that you guys have recognized and stuff that we're pretty proud of. One is around supplier and planning, working with suppliers around planning. And for probably 15 years now, we've done energy and climate emissions reporting and strategy work with suppliers on a 5-year basis. About 7 years ago, we recognized that to get after the kind of targets and ambition that we and our suppliers have, we need to stretch that even further and look 10 and beyond 10 years and beyond that. And so with suppliers representing roughly over half of our emissions, we've been working on 10-year planning cycles of looking at strategy. And from that has come out conversations from suppliers around, hey, look, I need help on being able to do science-aligned or science-based target setting. And we looked in the tools that existed into the marketplace, and we saw some challenges to be able to onboard and being able to set targets for suppliers. And so we reached out to partners like WRI and CDP, and we built what became called our Supplier Climate Action Program, SCAP program, that has proved to be very successful. We have nearing 70% of our suppliers now have science-aligned or science-based targets and continues to improve. And then we ended up gifting that program into the industry. And so working in our industry with an organization called Scale, we handed that off. From there, we looked at, and suppliers were telling us we're having a tough time having the capability of buying renewable energy. And we looked across and we saw Apple was in this space looking at the notion of a Clean Energy Procurement Academy. SIBO was engaged and interested within that work. And so then from there, we launched a supplier program, both in person and digital, on clean energy procurement, which is doing very well. And then finally was the enablement, the policy enablement within the markets that our suppliers are existing. And we knew there was challenges and the need for greater advocacy. And that's where we were very excited to be working with the Climate Group, to be working with WRI again, GWEC, and many other brands around the Asia Clean Energy Coalition, which is working in key supplier markets around opening those markets for renewable energy access. So those are a few examples. I was excited earlier, just on Monday, where we came together and we've got a new brand collaboration focusing on heat and thermal energy and igniting that space, which, as we see kind of electricity taking off, how do we accelerate and get more innovation through collaboration in that space?
Great, yeah, and I think maybe a few spoilers to a final answer here, but I think we've got just enough time for a quick, I guess, sum up from you both. So in a couple of sentences, your advice to, we've got members in the room today, this recording will go to our kind of global membership base as well. So your advice to them or a call to action in how best to engage their supply chain. Kevin, should we start with you first?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we like and find very compelling about the particular strategy that we've come up with RAC, which is not necessarily unique and the only way of doing things. It can be a complement to other approaches. Traditional supplier engagement, the good thing you want to have happen in the world, which is creation of new wind and solar and renewable energy, is rate limited by the success of your supplier engagement discussion. So first you have to talk to your supplier, you have to engage them, you have to convince them, you have to get them excited, and eventually they sign a contract and something good happens in the world. One of the things we like about the renewable acceleration model is you flip it around the other way. So first you do the good thing in the world. You go sign the PPA for 1.8 terawatt hours of electricity. You now have an asset to come back and have a supplier engagement discussion and say, hey, I've done this thing, it's gonna be in my scope 3 footprint. It could be in your scope 2 footprint as well, but if I've done this nice thing for you, you need to do something nice for me. And there's a lot of interesting opportunities for exchange of value at that point, as opposed to saying, I would really like you to do this thing and you should care about it because I'm an important customer to you. So it sort of flips it from an ask to a, like, I've got something for you, you can do something for me. And I think that's, thinking about, in general, how does this create value for your suppliers and where are the core competencies, right? So if you're a business that is RE100 and you've been at this for 10 years and you're experienced and you've signed PPAs and you know how to do that negotiation, is teaching your supplier how to do that always the right answer? Maybe not. Maybe sometimes you should just do it for them and then have the conversation about, okay, now that we've done this efficiently and at scale, how do we create some other value? How do you work on something that we can't solve in an aggregated way like this?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting and clear way of putting that almost reversal and taking it from a burden, which it sometimes feels like to suppliers, to a bit of an incentive there as well. And Scott, for you, one piece of advice to other companies?
Yeah, I kind of think of three things. One, ignore the noise right now. Out there, there is a lot of noise. Make sure you're clear on what is your value proposition. Why does this make sense? Have that alignment with your supply partners, and then stick to that value creation model that you've designed, and be careful with all the stuff that's going on around us. I think second, do walk the talk, and importantly, get your hands dirty and get underneath. If you're going to go talk to suppliers, know what you're talking about. And having actually done, I mean, a key part for us was understanding how to structure power purchasing agreements and being able to understand to then go help give them ideas and help guide them in a more constructive way. And then finally, probably be a partner, like lean in together with them, obviously through the collaboration efforts, but it's also on things like, before you go out there and set a big ambitious goal on top of them without consulting and going down and working with them, maybe bring them in to the process to ensure that that ambition is supported and you've got the alignment to be able to drive that forward.
Great. No, thank you both. Some great key messages for the audience to take away. So yeah, please join me in a final congratulations to Nike and Mars for their award.